All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the Million Dollar Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with my friend James. James, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's intimate here in your cab chassis truck.
That's right. Yeah, I'll cover that. And first I want to say, man, it's been, I mean, you and we have not seen each other in person since I think about 2013 at an underground event. And yet here we are catching up just like we're old friends picking up from our conversation just the other day, So,
it can be like that, can't it? It's amazing.
Right. That's right. And I am also, kind of experiencing a first today. Normally I'm sitting at my office, my home office computer doing these interviews. And right now in my home, they are in there refinishing all of our hardwood floors. And when they started turning those sanding machines on this morning, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this stuff. So I'm out here in my truck doing this interview today. So
you haven't really got a podcast until you have recorded in a substandard setup, lost an episode. There's all sorts of things that can happen over the course of a podcast.
That's right. That's right. And I'll tell you, this will be a first, and this one, I believe, is the 145th episode that we've recorded, and this will be a memorable one.
Congratulations.
So, James, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by just turn it over to you a little bit to share a little bit of your background, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you about the work that you do. We'll just kind of start there and set some context.
Well, these days I'm in more of a semi-retirement mode, which is a story into itself, but I work about 15 hours a week.
Okay.
Sometimes 10. I'm a partner in 8 businesses. And wow. I participate in a revenue share performance-based scenario with them. So it's a quasi-ownership. They're mostly in software or agency or information. They're things that my clients like to use, which makes it a good relationship. I still podcast, put out a few episodes, published a book and got a couple more coming because I want to share the information and bring on guests for my own members. I still have an online membership community. Typically, I serve intermediate to advanced online marketers. So I have a minimum criteria of the type of person who gets the best results with me. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 levels to that. There's a sort of an intermediate level and an advanced level. And that's about it. I keep it pretty simple. I've never had a fancy office. I have a small team in the Philippines.
Okay.
I've been at this for a while now. And figured out what I like, what I don't like. In that time, I've built an agency or 2, SEO agency, a web development agency. I sold them. I have tried a few different business models, but I've pretty much stayed in my lane. I'm a podcast membership / performance-based revenue share deal scenario now.
Gotcha. I'll tell you, I have a number of friends and myself included too that does stuff on a performance kind of a thing, and it's when you work with the right people, that's incredibly rewarding. And yeah.
And if you have to be good, you have to be able to get a result.
You got to be able to deliver some results.
Critically important. And yeah. I came from a commission world. Prior to the online business, I was in the car industry. I sold cars, initially BMW, then I switched to Mercedes-Benz, and then I worked my way through to sales management, and then eventually general management. So my whole career was performance-based, even though I was paid a component of wage and performance-based for the bulk of it. There was still a heavy competitive environment, a lot of expectation, a lot of looking at numbers and chasing targets. So it just became quite comfortable to me from the age of about 23 to bet on myself. Yeah. And I think that underlies everything that I do. And when I'm coaching my clients and mentoring people, I'm betting on them and I'm helping them bet on themselves too.
Yeah. So, okay. So I wouldn't normally ask a question like this, but I'm curious now, and if you're open to sharing, What's one of the most exciting performance-based clients that you've worked with? I mean, not necessarily sharing names, but like what transpired from it?
Well, I've got a software partner that is, become really close friends.
Okay.
This guy, I didn't know this guy at all. He booked himself onto one of my Maldives masterminds and apparently likes surfing. And so he's on the boat with me for a week in the Maldives. And he said, look, I'm just here to say hi, get some advice for my business, but also one day I'd love to be partners. And over the years, he kept coming back and we sat side by side, and he ended up building the software around the way that I run my business, to the point where it made sense for me to migrate my business into that software.
Wow.
And to become partners. And it's fair to say that software is responsible for a significant portion of the revenue I make. And beyond that, it's actually helped my customers the most, because I'm so invested in it being successful. And I've been able to have that relationship where I can tailor the software around my needs, the way that things should be done, that almost all the software platforms out there don't cater for, that my
Okay.
clients have an easy win. They can just set up and get going really quickly. It just removed that whole tech barrier that pretty much everyone, including myself, experiences when you come online.
Wow. Wow. That is a huge thing. Well, kudos to you guys. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And James, I'm just really excited to dig into this with you and have you share your story and your experience around this topic.
Part of me thinks it's a trick question, because I have this philosophy that the result of what the results we're getting now are pretty much all the choices we've made along the way, which inevitably, if you get to a certain age, you will have met many people. Whether people are conscious of it or not, or thinking about it, is a secondary sort of thought. Like, that saying, you become like the 6 people you hang around, whatever that saying is.
Yep.
So, I'd say in general, society are becoming just like the people I hang around with. So they are influenced to the point where that's the life that they've made possible because of the people around them. So I made a very conscious effort to filter and score the people around me, and be more scientific about it. I guess one of my mentors, this absolutely crazy guy, a lunatic, he taught me a scoring system for people, which might be very contra what you teach. It's super counterintuitive. But he said the problem, he said, James, the problem is, you're a nice guy and you're trusting and you believe in good humanity, all that sort of stuff. He said, most people start a new relationship with a 10 out of 10. And then when that person inevitably disappoints you or lets you down, you start to reduce the score down. He said, you know what I do? I start people on 0. And then I let them build up to a 10. And I thought it was a really interesting way to, it could be viewed as cynical or negative, but I think it's pretty wise in terms of avoiding getting ripped off, in terms of having a more focus and intention on seeing where someone has a positive impact and letting them lift their score. So I've actually experienced that, where I've met complete strangers. There was a guy I met on the beach out the front last year, complete stranger to me. And he came up to me and said, "Are you James Schramko?" And I said, "Yes." I'm thinking, is this guy a nut job or whatever? He said, "Oh, look, a friend of mine said that I should talk to you. I literally wrote your name down today to reach out to you, to talk to you about being on your podcast." And he said, "Hi, I'm Rick." And, from there, so I start the guy, instant reaction was, I'm just going to put this on a 0. Is he a knife wielding madman? Is he going to be a lifelong friend? Who knows? turns out we've become incredibly close friends. And so his number went up really quickly. It can happen in a week or a month, but it went up really quickly. And we've become tremendous friends. So I still like that system, but I would say I've met many, 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 like thousands of people have shaped the life I have. And it's unfair to single out one, because I think that's completely unrealistic.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll tell you what. So why don't, I mean, what I always tell my guests, and I know we talked about this before we hit the record button, but when I first started doing this podcast, I thought, oh, we'll talk about the one person, and like you, there was 3 episodes in, somebody was kind of like what you were like, Kevin, I can't narrow this down to one.
Well,
And
I can make it one, but I just want the disclaimer that it would be, it's a part of the fabric of the universe. It's not this, it's not that isolated event. And the reason I want to put a highlight on this is because as a coach, I get people reaching out to me a lot, and they have an expectation that you are going to be the magic wand that changes their life completely. And sometimes it could be unrealistic. They might have no offer, they have no current momentum, they haven't even started in some cases, and they're going to expect that you are that one thing that will change their life. And maybe that is possible, but it has to be realistic. They have to have a tool set to understand that they need to receive and act on that information, and that there will be other players along the way in the fabric of their life, right? It's a choir, not a soloist sort of situation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of guests, they have, honored one person, and other guests have honored multiple, and other guests have said, like you, man, Kev, there's been so many people over.
I think there's one pivotal one that relates that joins our history, and that would be a good example, I think, because you and I last interacted at Underground. There's a whole story around how I came online and quantum leaped, I guess is the easiest way to describe what happened as a result of this one person.
Well, I think that's a great person to talk about then, James.
Maybe I'll set the scene here.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
And forgive me if I don't get some of the specifics, because it was a long time ago, but we're talking about 15 years ago. So in the context of, it's a very foothills of my online journey. But around 2005, 2006, I was sort of getting into the online thing, maybe 2004. And there was a guy called John Reese. You probably heard of him.
Yeah.
Pretty famous guy in the online space. And he did $1 million in a day. Now, I still had a job, and I was very inspired by that. And it sort of removed some of the skepticism and gave me an example, thinking, well, if someone can do it, it's like the 4-minute mile. I'd be happy if it took me a whole year to make $1 million at that point.
Yep.
And so it kind of set the tone. And he published a training called Traffic Secrets.
Yeah.
And it was fairly expensive relative to my online income. At the time I was probably making $150 a month. It was just starting. Or hadn't even just started, but I was hearing about all this story. And there was a few things that were going on, but I ended up buying his set when it went on sale. It ended up being about $399, and it was like this run out sale. And now we're in the beginning of 2008, so it was years later. And I'd held off buying it, but I bought it, and I sat down and watched this DVD set while we're on a family vacation. I still had a job. I was a general manager of a Mercedes-Benz dealership. So I was in this high-powered job, and I had a whole week off, and I spent all of it watching DVDs. And it's like little light bulbs going off. I'm like, yep, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. I'm doing that. Oh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. And I took a couple of ideas, and by 2008, I was making, I think, around $5,000 a month from my affiliate marketing software, as it turns out, for how to build a website. And I took one of the ideas from that DVD set, implemented it, and I doubled straight away to $10,000 a month.
Wow. Wow.
And so I was sitting there thinking, okay, I left this a bit long to buy the DVDs. What would have happened if I was in that room when they recorded Traffic Secrets? So I was getting emails from this guy called Yannick Silva, and he was running an event in California. It's called Underground, and it was all very mysterious and had actual experts. And it wasn't a pitch type event. It was a pay the ticket and get content type event. There was still some things for sale, but it was predominantly very information centered. And I just thought, damn it, I'm going to go. And so I bought the ticket, and it was expensive. It was a couple of $1,000s. And I booked my flight to America. I hadn't been there since I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And I put in for some annual leave, which I didn't have a lot of. And I'm like, I'm pretty much, I think I flew there on a Friday, and the conference was on a Friday and Saturday. Like, I arrived and went straight into the conference.
Okay.
And I did 2 or 3 days. I can't remember how it was, maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then I flew back. I think I only took the Monday off work.
Wow.
And so I pretty much timed it where I would arrive, go to the conference, and then get back on the plane, and then have a shower and go to work. That was how tight it was. Like, and I put it on a credit card, because even though I was on a high salary, it was all gone in mortgage. You know, the house that I was living in 2008 was $771,500. Just to put perspective on this, because I know some North American listeners don't understand the cost of living in a city like Sydney. But basically all your money went to food and mortgage. I had 4 kids. So
wow.
I was really basically rolling the dice.
Yeah.
And I went to this event as a complete stranger. At the time I was making maybe 10 grand a month online. I still had a job. I didn't know a single person at the event. And I sat there I opened up my workbook, and I just paid attention to the speakers. And I saw all these great speakers. We watched videos. I can't remember if he was there live or we just watched a video of Gary Vee. But he was a wine guy then.
Yep.
We saw Eben Pagan, saw Ryan Lee and Mike Hill, and those Hubert Centers, and they were teaching really interesting stuff, like deep stuff. Like, that's when I learned about webinars. 2008. It's when I learned about CPV marketing. At this event, the content was stellar. Yeah. And I was taking notes. And then Eben Pagan was giving away a set of DVDs from his $10,000 Get Altitude event. And I really wanted that DVD. And so Yannick announced that there was a competition. And he said that, you've got to use $100 and do something good for other people, do something good for other humans. And then tomorrow by 9 a.m, tell us what you did, and we'll pick some winners. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. And I thought that the competition was to win the box set of Get Altitude DVDs, which I really, really wanted. So I'm thinking, well, $100 to win 10 grand worth of training, that would fast track me. That's another version of Traffic Secrets. And so I was starving, by the way. There was no food served at these events. There's something wrong with American events back then. No food, nothing, like, and you had to queue up for coffee in the breaks, and you couldn't even get it by the time the session went back in. And I attended every single session. I'm not one of those out in the hallway talk to people guys. Back then I was like, I'd invested everything in this trip. And I went back to my room. I thought about my idea. I went to the restaurant to try and eat. The server completely missed me. And I'm like, I'm waiting and waiting. I'm starving by now. I hadn't eaten all day, and I'd flown for 14 hours the night before. I was basically, my body was about to give up. I said to the guy, mate, am I going to get a table? Or he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot about you. what would you like to eat? I said, I will have the next thing that comes out of the kitchen. I don't care what it is, but I need to eat right now. And then I turned over my menu and I wrote my plan, what I'm going to do with this $100. And I wrote it out. As I wrote it, I was so filled with emotion that I started crying.
Wow.
I can't even explain it, but I was connected with this project. It was like I was exhausted. It was everything. And then, Kevin, I stayed up all night. I stayed up the whole night and did this project until the very morning. I documented everything that I did, and I burned it onto a DVD on my laptop, which took about 3 hours. So it was like I've just made the thing, and I ran down and I handed the DVD as this guy, Tim Warren, was walking into the room and said, "Here's my submission." And then didn't think much about it. And then about halfway through the day, Yannick announced the winners of the prize, and he called out this guy called John Morrow. It wasn't John Morrow. It was some other John. And then he called out my name, and apparently we jointly won this prize. And so I'm thinking, wow, I've won the DVD set. And I went up and they asked me to explain what I did. So now I'm there on the stage with 500 people in the audience, explaining to them how I took this $100 and turned it into something amazing for humanity. I took them through the process, and I went from absolute zero to spotlights on. And then he told me my prize, but I was wrong about the prize. It wasn't Even Pagans Get Altitude. He said, and you've won access to Maverick. Wow. And I'm thinking to myself, what's Maverick? I'd seen a couple of like banners around, and I saw a picture of an airplane or something, but apparently Maverick was his mastermind group for $1 million plus marketers, this exclusive group. And he said that, we look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas in 6 weeks. And wow. I'm just like, my heart kind of sank a bit, because I'm like, I can't afford to come back here in six weeks. I'm like, this was everything, this trip. So it's kind of like Jack and the beanstalk. I came back home, with a bean instead of a cow. And I remember coming home thinking, what am I going to do? Like, I started implementing the things I'd learned from the event. I started running CPV campaigns. I registered for GoToWebinar. I ran a webinar for my information product members in my first version of a membership, which was a lifetime membership, which suck. Don't do those. And basically, I had the conversation with my wife, and I said, I can't go back to America in 6 weeks. And she said, you have to go. You have to go. And so I booked the annual leave. I'm still on my credit card. It's starting to get a bit of traction, but because the CPV was working and the webinars were well received, but there wasn't an immediate payoff. And I got on that plane. I went to Las Vegas, and now I'm in the room with Peter Diamandis, Tony Hawk, Eben Pagan, Brad Fallon, Mike Filsaime, Mike Hill, a couple of underground marketers. One of them was making $100,000 a day. Tim Houston, I sat on the plane with him from San Francisco, and he was making $100,000 a month.
Wow.
I had these conversations. He's like, man, why do you rip yourself off so much? Like, you're a smart guy. Why aren't you making good money? Like, it just recalibrated everything. Yeah. And some of those relationships I formed, I started actually promoting some of their products. And I had this great idea that all these guys wanted help. And I was really good at the stuff that, there was Craig Ballantyne was there. And at the time he had his fitness site, Turbulence Training. I rebuilt his WordPress website for him. I sped it up. I optimized it. I was a gun at SEO, right? And good at website building. And so I started helping these people. And then I made some sites and promoted some of their products, did some CPV. One of the campaigns I was running, I was spending $3,000 or $4,000 a day and making $7,000 or $8,000 a day back straight after this event.
Nice.
I went out to, I got 2 clients, and I said, I'm doing online marketing services. This is in 2008. And not many businesses knew much about this in Australia. And I said, would you like me to help your business? And two of them said yes, one lawyer, one car dealer. And I
Okay.
charged them $5,500 each. And I just hit my salary level because I was earning about $300,000. And so I walked into my boss and quit. It was about July 2008.
Okay.
And from that month on, I've never missed $100,000 a month. And, I'm basically 15 years down the track, like at the semi-retirement phase of my business. And I went from mid-30s to in my 50s in that time. But all of the relationships that unlocked because of that one event.
Yeah.
Yannick's younger than me. He's a really great marketer. He's an incredibly sincere, generous, kind, well-intentioned person. And so much good came from that. I mean, not that long after, I think it was January or February 2009, I was found myself in the middle of the desert in Baja. We were driving rally cars across the desert, as it turns out, and we were around. We had a little gather round, and we were sort of doing those hot seats.
Yep.
And it was my turn, and I said, "Look, I've got myself on stage. I've got myself on a platform. I've been invited to speak at an internet summit, and I can pitch something $2,000 to $5,000. What should I sell?" And so Joe Polish is there, and Mike Filsame and Brad Fallon. They said, "Sell an event. Just sell them an event." A few weeks later, for a couple of $1,000. And I said, "Okay." So I went back. I sold an event from stage at World Internet Summit. I had my first in-room event. I think I sold about 70 something people at $2,000 each. It was the first time I'd made $100,000 in an hour, effectively. And some people brought partners. There's about 120 people in the room, which I had to pay for. I paid for meals, right? Since my events, since my experience at Underground, I always pay for meals. I give them hoodies,
You didn't want
workbooks.
people to have to be hunting for food.
I feed them because I don't want them out in the streets looking for food in between. I want them talking to each other and networking and bonding. So they bond around the meals and stuff. So there was a lot of lessons came from that experience. I had to get a friend of mine to build a software script that would enable me to teach people to go from scratch to identifying a market, to choosing a domain name, to writing the sales copy, to publishing it to their own website in 2 days.
Wow.
And I was able to do that. I got over 100 people to publish a website in about a day and a half from scratch.
Wow.
Like really pushing the envelope. And then what I did was very clever, I think. It gave all the people who came to the event a 60-day free access to my brand new membership. And so from the beginning of 2009 to this day, I've had recurring income from my membership. And it was off an idea that came from the desert in Mexico that was a result of me attending that underground event, Underground number 4, all those years ago.
Wow. I'll tell you, there's something to be said for having recurring revenue.
A lot to be said for it. I'd say a lot about recurring revenue.
Yes, I am a big fan of recurring revenue, and so, and it's, it's just, I have friends that, I have a friend of mine. I mean, he does really well for himself, and he's very successful, but he revenue isn't his focus, but he does make a lot of revenue, but yet at the same time, he will let his bank accounts dip down below, like really low, because then that it motivates him and inspire. Well, I need to create revenue and all that, and I'm just
he should set a new ceiling. Like, if my account dips below $1 million, then I would start panicking. Right? That's the time to get going. You need a lot of runway. You need to be able to pay your team and your living costs for years if you want to sleep well at night.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
the pandemic has tested people on that. A lot of people are doing a feast and famine, wear and tear business model, and it's crazy. If you've been online for any number of years, you'll see people come and go.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
more talented people are, the more visionary they are. They tend to be really bad at the integrator stuff, the looking at numbers, the systems, the people, and that's where people come unstuck. So there's a lot to do with their systems and people, and then there's something to do with the business model itself. I fix all of those things. That's pretty much what I help people do, is
Yeah.
getting the right business model, doing better with their systems and their people, and improving their conversions and working on themselves, making sure
Yeah.
they've got things dialed in so that they can actually survive. And it's definitely, the shift in focus for me from the 20s and 30s to 40s and 50s is most definitely focused more on the experiences and the the process to the end game now. I want to make sure I maximize it.
Yeah. 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 You know what an awesome story that not only, is such a testament to Yannick and who he is and what
And the
just
people
a
he attracts.
that's right, the kind of people he attracts and the power of relationships, because look at what came not only just for you from that, going to that one event and then getting actively engaged to, I mean, like actively and emotionally engaged in something that, and I think that, I mean, my personal belief is there, if there is not an emotional engagement, an emotional charge out of the work that we're doing, then we're missing out. We're missing the target. And there needs to be an emotional, engaging component to it. Otherwise, we're not doing our really best work and stuff. But all that came from that, not only for you, but how many lives have now been impacted over all of these years because that happened, because you went to that one event, because you then met all these other people. And I have firmly believed for many years that as entrepreneurs, relationships are our most valuable asset, and everything else stems from that. And you've shown that here today as well. And I want to just really thank you and honor you for that. And for anybody listening to this, James, that's just like, man, Kev, I really like this James guy. I love the way I would love to know more about him and the work that you guys are doing. How can people find out more about what you guys are doing, James?
Well, I've got jamesschramko.com. So
Okay.
there you go. And in terms of reach, you're right. Like, I think it's been around 5 million people listen to my podcast, and
Wow.
I've coached about 3,000 people now. So I've generated lots of success stories, and I'm proud of that. I've often operated in the background, still coach some famous people now who generous enough to actually let me mention their names, people like Pat Flynn. But it was great being on the team of guys like Ryan Levesque and Ezra Firestone to get those guys kicking along in their formative years. And so a big thank you to Yannick. I hope he gets to listen to this episode at some point, because if it really meets the criteria, I definitely would not have the life that I have now if I did not go to that event, if he didn't put on that event or put those connections together or generously gift me access to a club that I had absolutely no right to be in from a financial perspective. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, look what came from it. And, I mean, kudos to you, kudos to Yannick, and just what a journey it's been. And I'll tell you, like I said, my goal for this podcast is always been by interviewing and having conversations with entrepreneurs like yourself and allowing you the opportunity to share your story and your experience around this topic. We in turn, we get to just inspire them. to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their own life. And we have definitely delivered on that today. And so, James, I want to thank you so much for your role in that. And any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap?
Well, just back to the thing we talked about in the beginning, that anyone around you will influence your life. So pay attention to that. Who are you letting into your life? What even bad people? Some of the greatest lessons I had was from an absolute maniac who in the end threatened to kill me. But I got some of the most incredible lessons I've ever had from working in that environment and paying attention to two things. Like one was like, what are the good lessons here? And two, what are the things that I would make sure I do not incorporate into my life? The instability, the psychotic, manic, drug-fueled rampages. I could skip that part.
Yeah,
it's
for
not
sure,
healthy.
right?
And he ended up dying. It was pretty crazy. And so that it sort of punctuates the point that everyone around you is going to influence you. Just decide how you're going to let that influence you.
That's right. That's right. Well, James, once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation today. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate you. Thank you again.
Thanks. And I just thought of something, by the way. Has anyone mentioned their kid yet?
No.
Because, like at the end of the day, if I didn't have my first kid when I was like 24, there's no way I would have even gone into a high pressure selling role, and nothing I have in life would be the same as it is now. So that being introduced to that person, Jack, changed my life incredibly. So that's something just obviously, so it's so obvious that I might have overlooked that, but yeah, it's like when people ask which book changed your life the most, possibly my book, because the process of creating it and then sharing it to thousands of people is transformative.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I became I waited till later in life to become a dad, but my son Brock was born in 2008, and I will tell you that was an absolutely transformative experience, becoming a father. And I mean, I could start talking a whole conversation about that. And so,
Me too.
yeah. Well, James, thanks again. Thanks so much. Really appreciate having this conversation with you today. I know a lot of people are really going to get a lot out of this, and I'm excited to make sure that Yannick sees it too, so that we can honor him too. So thank you again.
Thanks, Kevin. That's really nice.